Every ranger station has a map with colored zones: green for patrol routes, yellow for restricted areas, red for hazard zones. But at Silver Ridge Station, we have one more color, a black circle around Sector 9. It's not on the official maps. We draw it ourselves. And after sunset, nobody crosses that line. The camera of the mind pans across a worn corkboard map, coffee stains, frayed corners, red thumbtacks marking trails. A single hand, calloused, dirt under the nails, draws a thick black ring around a shaded section near the northern ridge. The ink bleeds slightly into the paper, as if the forest itself doesn't want its boundaries disturbed. Silver Ridge National Forest stretches across hundreds of square miles of old-growth cedar and mist-drenched valleys in the Pacific Northwest. It's the kind of place that never truly dries out. The air smells of wet moss and rusted tools. Trees rise like pillars in an open cathedral, their tops fading into fog. In daylight, it's breathtaking. After dark, it swallows sound. Ranger Marcus Webb has worked these woods for 18 years. Former search and rescue lead, part-time survival instructor, and one of the few people left who still prefers paper maps over GPS. He isn't the type to scare easy. Methodical. Skeptical. The kind of man who trusts his training and nothing else. He sits at his desk, radio logs scattered beside an enamel coffee mug. On the wall, the black circle glares back like a bruise. "Daylight patrols only," he says quietly. "If you're in there when the sun touches the ridgeline, you run." How sectors work. National forests, like Silver Ridge, are divided into zones for safety and maintenance. Green zones, public trails, ranger access, and established camps. Yellow zones, ecological recovery areas, unstable slopes, or wildlife habitats. Red zones, active hazards, fire scars, landslides, chemical runoff. Unofficial sectors, the kind that never make it onto a visitor's map, exist in almost every park. Sometimes they're old mining claims. Sometimes they're leftover survey errors. And sometimes they're places where equipment fails for no good reason. Search and rescue teams call these shadow corridors, stretches of terrain where signal and sense both go missing. GPS units drop connection. Radios hum with static. Even compasses can drift several degrees off true north. It's a known phenomenon: mineral interference, magnetic deposits, steep terrain. At least, that's the scientific explanation. At Silver Ridge, the shadow corridor begins where Sector 9 starts. Marcus leans back in his chair, eyes on the map as the station clock ticks past dusk. Somewhere outside, a raven caws once, its echoes swallowed by fog. He doesn't glance toward the window. "We all know where the line is," he murmurs. "Nobody needs to mark it twice." He clicks off the recorder and closes the logbook, the words Sector 9, off limits after dark, stamped across the cover in fading ink. The page beneath it is blank. And that's the part that unsettles him most, because every ranger at Silver Ridge knows why the circle exists. They just don't talk about how it got there. The first Silence 2007 incident. The logs show she checked in at 1947 hours. Sector 9 all clear. Setting up camp near the old fire tower. Weather holding. Will check in at dawn. That was the last anyone heard from Ranger Janet Holloway. The storm had rolled through the night before. Nothing severe, just enough to scatter branches and wash out a few switchbacks. Holloway volunteered for the inspection. She was one of the best. 12 years in service, no disciplinary notes, and a reputation for treating every patrol like a quiet hike with a clipboard. She'd handled worse. When she signed out from Silver Ridge Station, the air smelled of cedar and ozone. By all accounts, the sky was clear. At exactly 2000 hours, her radio transmission cut mid-static. No distress code, no mayday, just the faint click of a line going dead. The automatic emergency beacon didn't activate. Her GPS tracker, though fully charged, never pinged again after that minute. When the morning team found her, she was sitting upright at the base of the old fire tower, hands folded loosely in her lap. The tent was unpacked but not erected. The ring of stones she'd built for a fire still held dry tinder. Her thermos sat unopened. She was conscious, breathing evenly, eyes fixed on the horizon. She responded to touch but not to words. The medical report from the retrieval team reads like something between a case study and a confession. Subject exhibits symptoms consistent with acute psychological trauma. Pupils dilated, heart rate elevated, non-responsive to verbal stimuli for approximately 6 hours post-recovery. Physical injuries, none. When she finally spoke 3 days later in the regional medical center, her first words were simple: "It got dark too fast." Then, after a pause long enough for the doctor to think she'd fallen asleep, "I heard the forest counting." Field note: the valley shadow effect. In mountainous terrain, sunset isn't a single moment. It's a sequence. As the sun dips behind the ridgeline, valleys below fall into darkness 20 to 30 minutes earlier than the sky above suggests. Rangers call it the valley shadow. In that sudden dimming, the brain scrambles for equilibrium. Your eyes tell you it's night, but your watch says daylight remains. Depth fades, distance distorts. The mind fills the gap with movement, shape, and sometimes sound. Add to that the auditory rhythm illusion, a neurological reflex where the brain assigns order to chaos. The wind through leaves, the drip of condensation, even the slow flex of wood in the cold, all can fall into what sounds like a repeating pattern. Some hear it as knocking, others as footsteps, a few as counting. That's what the service wrote in the report. What they didn't include was the part about Holloway's equipment. Her compass pointed due west, no matter how it was turned. It wasn't magnetized wrong, it simply refused to move. Her watch had stopped at exactly 2000, the same minute her transmission cut out. The repair technician later noted no internal damage, no corrosion, and no reason for it to fail. The radio powered on without issue. Its log showed nothing after 1947, except one unregistered click, time-stamped 20 hours 0 minutes and 6 seconds. For years afterward, Rangers debated what happened that night. Some blamed magnetic interference from iron deposits near the ridge. Others said she panicked when the light dropped and her instruments failed. The official explanation called it environmental disorientation due to topographic conditions. But the people who worked with Holloway knew better. Janet didn't panic. She didn't lose track of time. Something else did. The following spring, Ranger Webb added a note to the patrol handbook. Sector 9 regulation, daylight patrols only. No overnight stays permitted beyond ridgeline. He underlined it twice and added a new section to the map, hand-drawn, thick black ink around the northern quadrant. When recruits asked why, he'd tell them the same thing every ranger still tells today. Because Janet Holloway came back before dawn, but something else in that forest didn't stop counting. And that's when the rule was born, the first unwritten law of Silver Ridge. No overnight patrols in Sector 9. Echoes and intervals, 2011 and 2015 cases. It happened again 4 years later. 2 rangers, 2 different patrol routes, one night. Ranger Daniel Mitchell was assigned to the west approach, following the floodplain trail. Ranger Luis Torres started from the opposite side, up near Timberline Pass. Both were scheduled for routine trail maintenance sweeps, short patrols before forecasted rain. Neither one was supposed to enter Sector 9 after sunset. But according to the logs, both checked in just before 1945 hours. Their transmissions were normal. Location reports, clear weather, no movement on sensors. Then, at 1955, both radios recorded the same thing. a sound. Low, regular, almost mechanical. 12.3 seconds apart. Not a heartbeat, not footsteps, a pulse, like pressure pushing through static. At 2000, both radios went silent. Rescue Operations Report, April 12, 2011. Search teams located both Rangers at dawn. Mitchell was found on the South Ridge, Torres, 4 miles east, yet both sat facing the same direction, the old fire tower. Neither recalled the previous night. Their watches had stopped at 2000. They weren't injured, only confused. Their boots were muddy, their packs still zipped, and their radio antennas were extended, as if they'd been listening for something until the batteries died. When audio engineers analyzed their field recorders, the data was almost identical. Each device captured 42 minutes of background noise, wind, low-frequency resonance, and one consistent anomaly. Every 12.3 seconds, a soft vibration hit the mic like a faint exhale. The two recordings were synchronized perfectly, despite the Rangers being miles apart. Official report notation. Coincidence probability, less than 0.02%. The Forest Service called it equipment interference due to overlapping frequency distortion. The Rangers called it something else. They called it the interval. Understanding sensor anomalies. Most Ranger field recorders and patrol cameras operate on the same fundamental system, a quartz timing chip synchronized with GPS data to timestamp images and audio. In areas with strong geomagnetic variance, like mineral-heavy ridges, these timing circuits can drift out of sync. A 1-second delay across multiple units might sound trivial, but to sensitive audio equipment, it creates phantom rhythm, where background noise aligns into repeating intervals. Infrared cameras suffer similar quirks. Heat reflection from dew, fog, or metallic minerals can mimic moving shapes. Even lens flare from residual sunlight can register as a, quote, false heat signature. That's the theory, anyway. It explains why a single camera might glitch. Not why 4 separate devices, miles apart, record the same rhythm down to the decimal. By 2015, the stories surrounding Sector 9 had grown quiet but not forgotten. A younger crew decided to challenge the superstition. They set up a dozen trail cameras along the sector perimeter to prove once and for all that the pulse was just environmental noise. For the first 12 hours, everything worked as expected. Daytime footage, deer, elk, black bear, ravens. 1945, sunset light flickering through fog. 2000, ordinary nightfall. Then came the pattern. At 2015, every camera recorded faint thermal signatures, tall, narrow, and motionless, arranged in a semicircle facing the tower clearing. At 2030, all cameras blacked out simultaneously. The visual feed went dark, but the microphones kept running. 12.3 seconds. A soft pulse through the static, over and over. At 6 o'clock, the feeds resumed as if nothing had happened. When the Rangers retrieved the units, they noticed something stranger. 3 of the cameras had been moved, precisely 100 feet from their original markers, each now aimed directly at the fire tower. No footprints, no drag marks. Just repositioned, as if something had wanted to see what they were looking at. Forensic analysis summary. Device timers, perfectly synchronized before deployment. Drift variation, 0.0 seconds, impossible under natural conditions. Audio match to 2011 recordings, 99.8% frequency alignment. Environmental interference, insufficient to explain pattern. The official stance remained cautious but firm. No verifiable hazard. Recommend continued daylight patrols only. Unofficially, the Rangers didn't need a report to remind them. That year, Marcus Webb redrew the black circle on the map by hand. A little wider, a little darker. And when the new recruits asked why, he told them, "Because every time we try to measure it, the forest measures back." The superstition became protocol, the protocol became tradition, and by the end of 2015, Sector 9 had earned a reputation every ranger understood, even if none of them could explain it. The unwritten protocol. Ranger Marcus Webb still keeps the old field map pinned above his desk, the one with the thick, hand-drawn black circle enclosing the northern ridge. He redraws it every spring, the way the rangers before him did. "We don't call it superstition," he says. "We call it pattern recognition. There are no printed memos, no directives in the service database, no emergency codes that mention Sector 9. But every ranger at Silver Ridge Station knows the routine by heart. The unwritten protocol. 1930, all rangers exit Sector 9. 1945, 5-minute interval radio checks for anyone still in transit. 1958, if a ranger hasn't reported by then, the line goes quiet. Retrieval waits until dawn. Not out of fear, out of respect. You don't go chasing noise in the dark, Webb explains. That's how people don't come back the same. He's not an excitable man. His log entries read like checklists. Weather conditions, visibility, barometric pressure. But when he talks about the tower, his tone shifts just slightly, as though the words themselves are heavy. The fire tower. It stands at the center of the black circle, skeletal and silent. Built in the 1950s, decommissioned in 1987, and marked for demolition in 2008, though that never happened. At least, not officially. The ladder was cut down, Webb says. We didn't find out who did it for years. Turns out, 3 different rangers admitted to it independently. Over the course of a single month, none had coordinated. None had even mentioned it in their shift reports. Each one used the same words. Something was climbing it at night. The ladder was steel-reinforced aluminum, resistant to rust, structurally sound. It should have survived another 50 years. But the corrosion along the cut edges looked different, as if it had aged decades overnight. Now, only the tower's frame remains, 40 feet tall, stripped bare against the fog. Its shadow stretches long and crooked across the clearing when the light fades, a sundial no one watches after dark. Why compasses fail? Old metal structures often distort magnetic fields. Over time, corrosion alters conductivity, creating localized magnetic interference that can throw compasses off by several degrees. Combine that with nearby iron deposits in Silver Ridge's northern soil, and a compass can appear to hunt, swinging in unpredictable loops. At night, under low visibility, this drift feels alive, like the forest itself is tugging your sense of direction. Psychologists studying low-light disorientation note another phenomenon. When humans lose stable light references, time perception falters. Minutes stretch, seconds vanish. In darkness, we don't measure time by clocks. We measure it by heartbeat and breath. That's why rangers who've entered Sector 9 after sunset report the same confusion. Their watches fail first. Then their internal sense of rhythm collapses into that recurring 12.3-second pulse, as though the forest resets its own metronome and forces the body to follow. Investigation Summary, Incident Log Correlation, 2007 to 2024. Marcus flips open the binder labeled Anomalous Field Reports. Inside, each entry looks the same. Clean printouts, no embellishment, each time-stamped with military precision. He's compared them dozens of times. The pattern never changes. Within 90 seconds of sunset, light levels drop faster than expected. Compass bearings deviate westward. Radio static builds into rhythmic pulse. Interval 12.3 seconds. Subject orientation shifts toward the old tower. Memory gaps begin. That's not a legend, that's data. Even the skeptics in the service stopped arguing after the last attempt to test the rule in 2021 ended with a ranger found staring at the tower base Watch frozen, pulse slow but steady, and no recollection of entering the zone. Marcus's takeaway: he doesn't talk about ghosts or curses. He talks about survival patterns. The woods have memory, he says. And memory leaves fingerprints. Maybe it's magnetic, maybe it's something in the rock or the air pressure. Doesn't matter. It repeats. Always the same sequence. Darkness, pulse, tower, silence. He pours another cup of coffee, eyes still on the black ring on the map. People say we're afraid to go back in. They're wrong. We're cautious because the forest's been patient longer than we've been alive. We don't tempt what waits in the dark. We acknowledge it. Outside, the last streak of daylight sinks below the ridge. Marcus glances at the clock. 19:45. He keys his radio once, more out of habit than duty. Silver Ridge check. All units report. Static, then quiet. Copy, he murmurs. All clear. He logs the call, draws the circle one last time, and writes the final line beneath it. Respect the pattern. Survive the night. After dark, Marcus Webb never meant to break the rule. He'd patrolled Silver Ridge for nearly 2 decades, logged thousands of hours in the field, and seen his share of strange phenomena, mirages, magnetic drift, even full-blown panic cases. But last summer, curiosity outpaced caution. I wanted to see what they were really talking about, he says in the recording. The pulse, the darkness, the way time slips. It was late July, clear skies, no fog. Sunset predicted for 2001. Marcus entered Sector 9 at 19:15, determined to leave by 1950, 10 minutes before official cutoff. The forest was calm. Birdsong whined through needles, normal soundscape, nothing out of place. At 19:30, he checked his watch. Everything fine. Then, next time he looked, 1958. No in-between, just gone. He swears he didn't stop walking, didn't lose consciousness, but the world around him had changed. The trees were black silhouettes, and the air felt dense, like water pressing against his chest. That's when the pulse began. Low, rhythmic, 12.3 seconds apart. It wasn't just sound, it was movement. The earth itself seemed to breathe beneath his boots. His radio hissed with faint echoes of his own voice, delayed, warped, repeating fragments of words he hadn't said yet. Sector 9. Check. 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 He turned east, heading for the ridgeline. But when his flashlight swept through the clearing, something impossible stood ahead of him. The fire tower. He'd been walking away from it. Now it was in front of him, fully visible against a pitch-black sky, its broken frame catching faint starlight like old bone. And on the platform, where the ladder should have been, stood a figure. Tall, narrow, still. Facing him, Marcus froze. His radio crackled with dispatch chatter. Webb, status check? He tried to respond. The words came out half a second late, like his voice was traveling through syrup. Copy, I'm fine. But the echo that came back wasn't his. I'm fine. He turned and ran. Branches clawed at his sleeves, the ground tilted, the air pulsed faster. 12 seconds, 10, then 8. He didn't remember choosing a direction, only the instinct to move toward a way. When he stumbled back into the parking lot, gasping under the floodlights, his watch read 2014. Dispatch told a different story. His last transmission had been 3 minutes ago. 3 missing minutes. He filed his report under equipment malfunction. But that night, sitting alone in the ranger station, he took out a marker and redrew the black circle on the map, thicker than ever before. Educational insert: magnetotemporal interference, field hypothesis. Silver Ridge's quartz-rich geology may generate localized electromagnetic feedback, producing disruptions in both compass function and neural timing. When the human brain's temporal lobe encounters fluctuating EM fields, it can distort memory encoding and perceived time duration, essentially creating missing minutes. Add adrenaline to the mix and perception fractures. Time stretches or compresses depending on heartbeat rhythm. Fear becomes the metronome. Scientists call it cognitive distortion. Rangers call it something simpler. They call it the interval. Final field log. Recorded transmission. Every ranger who stayed came back different. We don't investigate because we respect what we don't understand. The forest doesn't chase you out, it just waits until you can't leave. Sound of markers scraping paper. A black circle being redrawn, thicker than before. Then silence. 12.3 seconds pass. And from somewhere deep in the recording, a faint, steady pulse answers back.